there's this nice saying that says, "You are what you repeatedly do." And I think our ego is being shaped through all the interactions that we had. I can easily say that the person that I became is completely a function of all the interactions that I had. There's this part, of course, innate. There's this part, the guy I was when I was 20. There's a part of me being shaped by being in the Netherlands. And so all these things come together in what I call a strategy to interact with the world. And this strategy to interact with the world is your ego. And the problem with of course, with your own personal sense of happiness and with life in general, is that we tend to think that happiness results from feeding that ego or boosting that ego. And so we're all hunting for success and we're hunting for recognition. And we're constantly trying to see that ego being, being pampered.
Yeah.
And we're completely addicted to this repetitive sense of that your ego matters. And so that's for instance one of the key things that social media exploit. They constantly give us these little dopamine shots, so our ego gets the sense that people are still thinking about us and that we're still important. Boom.
Boom. Do you know?
English. Yeah.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Peter.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Great seeing you again after 25 years, 22 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. We were young, we were innocent.
And we are still young and a little less innocent.
Fair enough.
But for me, you're the same. Nothing has changed, although we haven't spoken in 20 years.
Yeah, now, they can. I think they do a lot with Photoshop these days.
Now, we're going to immediately dive in. Tom, I mean, you're specialized in human behavior. I learned that after your studies, when we have met, that you didn't want to. You teach actually. So you were a professor, if I'm correct, but you didn't want to go to in how do you say that, in healthcare or in psychiatry. And then you went into marketing. Is it correct? This is very high level. Now, do you believe that human behavior will change as a result of Corona? Or do you believe that people are longing to go back as soon as possible to the, I would call it the old normal?
Yeah. Well, that's a $1 million question, isn't it? I would say human behavior is largely determined by our context, by the way our context shapes our behavior. And what is really interesting in the Corona crisis is that we are basically thrown into a new, completely new, different context. We have to figure out how to manage your family, manage your work, operate as a good team, be productive while working in distributed team and while trying to figure out how to make these good tools of collaboration work. And what I've seen, and we've done some research on it, is that that when people finally start to embrace it, and when, for instance, definitely what also works is when their kid is finally being allowed to go back to school again or to kindergarten, so that they can actually be alone and be productive and manage their own time, that people really start to appreciate the power of working distributedly. And I think one of the there's a lot of psychological motivations that we want to see accomplished when we are at work. And some important motivations are: we want to be appreciated, we want to be seen as an expert, we want to have the feeling that we're part of a team that is doing awesome things, We want our manager to feel and to see and to appreciate our contribution. We want to make progress. We want to get things done. So these are all psychological motivations that we want to see fulfilled through work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that go wrong at the workplace. So, for instance, there's this constant stream of interruptions. There's this constant obsessive, definitely in corporate environments, there's this obsessive culture of managing your own personal brand. And so you get flooded with all kinds of meetings, because these meetings are nothing more than people constantly trying to build coalitions to make decisions for which they can distribute accountability.
Yeah.
And somehow when you're working at home, you need to, on the positive side is, you start to realize that for the first time you can get back into deep work modus for the first time. So you actually manage to do things without being interrupted, and people find it very valuable. Second thing they find very valuable is they stop losing so much time through commuting or through meetings. On the other hand, you sometimes see that the badly managed teams, that they still have to be in Zoom meetings for like 7 hours a day, and that's absolutely exhausting. So once people start to figure out how to make it work, and they realize that they have much more time for themselves, that they can get into much more deeper work, so they become more creative, they can tap into much more the intellectually challenging parts of their job. But what they do need to manage is this social psychological thing. And that's a very important role, for instance, for leaders. They need to make sure that they don't see their role as managing the process of the team towards the outcome, but much rather that they also manage the psychological well-being of the team, that they facilitate the fact that they can be productive, not being interrupted, that they get clear feedback on how they are performing. And that's, I think, the really interesting challenge. Once you get there, people will definitely want, I think in the toekomst, want to have a mix of both. Still very valuable to be at the office, but there's also so much value now to be at home that you don't want to get rid of that.
That's true. Do you believe that, is that cliche? Some people they have a lot of fear. The majority actually of people have a lot of fear during Corona, wearing their masks, and then you have like people screaming, this is an opportunity. Do you believe that after Corona, the real crisis will start, and especially that a lot of people will need some mental / psychological help to, I wouldn't say find themselves again, because I wouldn't say they're going into a kind of depression because they cannot handle this kind of change and this kind of fear, which is actually exaggerated also by popular media, because they make money out of it.
Can you define crisis? What do you mean with crisis?
That's a very good thing. For me, there is no crisis, to be honest. No, it isn't. I don't feel it. I mean, I'm healthy. My son is here. Okay, I had to admit I had to adapt to the situation, but I agree with all the things. I can now. I mean, this thing is a result of Corona. So I'm tapping into creativity, whereas in the past I was sitting in the car driving to Brussels or to Antwerp in traffic jams. So I use that time now to do this kind of things, which gives me more energy, to makes me also more productive at work.
Yeah.
But I believe majority of people, if I look at my parents and they're watching the news, they are really, really, really scared.
Yeah. 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 You know, there's so many angles to this story. I do think that that this crisis kind of puts the spotlight on everything that is actually that was already going wrong in the economy. That we were all. I think that the biggest maybe that's a good way to approach it. The biggest marketing lie that we have been told for the last 50 years was that we are all individuals, and that we need to express our own individuality by our own unique individuality by consuming stuff. And so we express our individuality through the car we buy, through the kind of holiday we go to, through the kind of brands and products we buy. And that has been an engine for the economy, a phenomenal engine for the economy. but it's gradually it gradually eroded the thing that we as eventually in the end we're just a monkey with nukes. But we as a species are incredibly social. We're social animals. We only thrive when we feel connected, when we feel part of something bigger, when we feel that we are belonging to a group. Actually, the fact that you mentioned depression is an interesting one, because even already Freud back in his days, but also recent research clearly shows that people who slip into a depression, that the core idea, the core driver of depression is the feeling of completely being disconnected from others, that you are existentially alone. And the only solution to depression, okay, there's of course there's a medical solution to it, or there's at least medicine help you to get out of the deepest darkness of depression. But what really helps is to form meaningful relationships again. And I think what Corona definitely, on the one hand, highlighted was that we are much lonelier than we thought, and it frustrates the hell out of us. We just sit there in our own homes with our own fences, sitting in front of the TV all day. And on the other hand, it shows that we're craving for this sense of belonging and community. That's why you see all these heartwarming initiatives. That's why you see that people want to be connected, and that maybe the world will change. Maybe we will stop listening to politicians who want to divide us and devise us, but much rather want to listen to people who want to, bring a story of togetherness again, and a story of belonging, and a story of community.
And you just talked about depression. And of course, I'm not an expert, but is that also that people are suffering from a depression because the image or the identity that they have created is so far from who they really are?
Absolutely. Freud compared depression with mourning, not the morning, but mourning, as in someone died in your environment and you're in this phase of mourning. And he said depression and mourning is exactly the same thing. With mourning, mourning is like a depression of the fact that a part of you just died, because a little part of you was connected to this person that you loved. And depression about yourself is mourning about your own identity, about the feeling that you gradually started to become one with a role that you need to play in order to please some people, but that there's this complete emptiness behind this role that you were playing. And once you get confronted with this, with the emptiness behind the role that you were playing, you get depressed for the fact that you completely lost the sense of identity.
Now, we were born in a generation and also in an area, because we're born in factually, I would say, a couple of kilometers away from each other. But for us, religion was still strong. It was the Catholic Church. And I also believe that was the same for you. But nowadays, religion isn't that strong anymore. So, because all the things that you're saying, for me, it really is crossing the borders of, I wouldn't call it positive psychology, but even spirituality. And human behavior and the spirituality. I mean, you're working in the science, I would call it like that. And then you have like the more, I would say it's spirituality. I mean, you see those two things coming more together, or is that still, you also talk about purpose, mission thing. That's, for me, it's really about spirituality, who you are and what the hell are you doing here on this earth thing.
But the thing is that we have access to the kind of the latest scientific thinkers. We listen to podcasts. We read people like Sam Harris. We are tapped into this new way of thinkers, of philosophers and social scientists who think hard about how do you design your own life in such a way that it contributes to a fulfilling life and to happiness. But the thing with religion was that every religion is an ideology, and whether you take religion or you take fascism or you take communism, the function of ideology has always been that it provides you with clear answers about power, about life and death, and about identity. It tells you how society should be structured. It tells you something about what is the purpose of life. And of course, for the religious people, the purpose of life is to live a good life, to have eternal happiness in heaven. For the communists, is you devote your life to building the ultimate utopia of equality. And I think the good part of every ideology in the past was that it provided people with a very simple set of rules that said who you are, what are the rules for your life, and what is the purpose of your life. And given the fact that we left ideologies, and that our ideologies basically weren't replaced with a new one, but just with this liberal ideology of the purpose of life is to enjoy yourself and consume stuff, that leads to this very, very I think existential crisis.
Yeah.
Because people have no idea what the purpose of life is, and have no idea what to live for.
Yeah.
And the more they get detached from, being part of something bigger and being part of a community, the more depressed they get.
Because this is a very interesting one. I read 2 or 3 days ago your essay about making the climate change thing sexy. And there was one thing which I also did, and I really believe in that. I read 2 things. First of all, you talked about a company which is focusing on shareholder value, so the growth for the growth. On the long term, he will destroy the company. I worked in lots of companies who have that as a goal. I can assure you the fucking truth. Second, the same with happiness. A lot of people, as this new generation, searching for happiness. Yeah. If you're searching for happiness, the result is you're going to be so miserable, because it's like trying to catch a butterfly, but you cannot grab it because it slips always through your fingers. It is just when you're starting to focus on fulfillment, on a kind of your mission, your purpose, whatever that may be, even if it's not right, if it does not fit with you anymore within 10 years, it doesn't matter. But if you're thinking on focusing on that mission, then the side effect is you will make lots of money as a company, because you're purpose driven, and you'll be also happy because it's about the journey and it's not about the destination. It's like, I'm a musician. I mean, what is the goal of a song? It's about enjoying the music, but it's not about that final chord. Otherwise, we would just play final chords.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't invent that. It's Alan Watts, by the way. So
okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a little bit attached to the things you were just saying. Now, how did you came you with an idea to create an essay about making climate change sexy? Do you have so much spare time?
No. So my company is specialized in behavioral change. It's called SUE Behavioral Design, and basically we are a consultancy that helps our clients to improve their products and marketing and communication through behavioral psychology. And I work for governments, I work for banks, I work for private companies on how to influence consumer behavior, citizen behavior, employee behavior, things like that. And I think that what I'm always fascinated with is how can I use this what I call dark wisdom, this dark knowledge of influence and behavioral change, and how can I apply this to complicated, wicked design problems? That literally, there's a word for that: wicked design problems. Whether that would be extremism or extreme right-wing populism. How can you, for instance, understand how populists shape public discourse and how they win elections, and how can you use that understanding to get more moderate people to win elections? So, for instance, in the Netherlands, I work for the Liberal Party. In Belgium, I work for the Socialist Party on that matter. And climate change to me is one of those most fascinating wicked design problems. It has everything. It is the ultimate behavioral challenge. So it's something that will pay off in the future. Yeah. So you're asking people to change their behavior in the long distant future. They feel that they have no impact on that behavior because it goes way beyond their individual spending behavior. There's all kinds of counter forces that claim that there is no such thing as climate change, and that basically climate action is just a complot by these left-wing nutcases who want the normal guy to pay for it. So there's this whole ideological charge in that argument. And I was invited 2 weeks ago on the Belgian television in a television program to. I've written an essay before, and in which I argued that that we will only get people to change their behavior when there's a crisis. So I called the title of the essay was the climate shock doctrine. I said, look, we will have 4 to 5 to maybe 10 years in which we will see the first ecological collapses, in which we will see the first crisis like flooding, drought, etc. And it is only when there's this high visibility crisis that people suddenly start to feel shit, things are wrong, and then we need to have the script ready for people to. We need to have the action plan and scripts ready so that politicians would go, okay, this is the plan, this is how we're going to tackle the problem. And it's based on a theory by Naomi Klein called the shock doctrine, and she said that every time some shock in society took place in history, it was used by the powers that be to tighten their grip on society. So classic example, 9/11, the Republicans and the corporate world used the panic of 9/11 to tighten their grip on society. Financial crisis is exactly the same. There was this crisis while the corporate world and even the financial world used that crisis to siphon even more money towards their interests. And so the question in the TV program was, is this corona crisis the crisis that you were talking about that is going to change our behavior, that going to shake up people to start climate action? And my argument was that probably this one isn't going to be the one, because I think the beauty of this crisis is that we clearly feel that it's about us. It's threatening our life, it's threatening our job, it's threatening our family. So there's, given the fact that it's about us in the here and the now, we are willing to do everything we can to make it work. And so the trillions that are being thrown at the problem right now is just literally within the course of 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that amount of money. The climate movement was dreaming to get that amount of money spread over 10 years. And so we need to figure out new ways to talk about climate in such a way that people feel that it's about them and it's about the here and the now. And I wanted to contribute to that conversation by providing the frames, the communication frames through which we should be talking about the climate problem.
Great. Now I watched your TEDx talk, and it's it's really strange because since we have met like 20 years ago, I still see the same boy, and you have still that mix between being very serious and also being, I wouldn't say making yourself a little bit like a joke, but you have that really fantastic combination. I really say that your mission is to manipulate people to make the world a better place. And you say it as a joke, but I also feel it that you also really mean that.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm really convinced that, okay, you're in marketing and in advertising, but I really believe that you want to make the world a better place and reshape the world of advertisements and actually reshape that paradigm that right now, and I'm going to say it more directly than you just said. I mean, what is advertising doing? It's going to make you feel inferior, and if you want to feel good, drink this thing, or buy this thing, or buy this car, shampoo. And then indeed, especially for me, and then, or that razor blades that I will be very attractive to other women, and I really believe that you want to, because it's we can laugh at it, but I mean, if you look at especially people around 15, 16, especially added with a lot of social media and the comparison trap and the instant gratification. I mean, I mean, if I look at their depression, suicide tendencies, and anxiety, it's very big there. Even if I look in my own environment, so children of my friends, and I really feel that you, really want to reshape that form. Look, I mean, selling is good, which I also believe, but it really depends how you define selling. How do you define advertisement? And that's the thing that I also believe that you are striving for.
Absolutely, and glad to see that you picked that up. Look, I think that I've always been fascinated with the idea that that the knowledge and the know-how of how to influence minds and shape behavior is just out there. And I think that in the last 10 years, there's this perfect storm of manipulation. So we've seen an excessive growth on understanding how to influence behavior in the last 10 years. And I think that was in the slipstream of Silicon Valley, because they want to know and to learn how to get people to click on things and how to get them to buy. And so it was really Silicon Valley that rediscovered the importance of psychology in marketing and in design. And I think in the last 10 years, there's now this combination of psychology and technology that is being combined into this monster. And someone used the phrase, we're now trapped in a race to the bottom of the brainstem, which means that that technology, artificial intelligence, knows so well how to tap into our deepest desires, our deepest fears, and actually fuel them, make those desires bigger or make that fear bigger. Because the purpose of AI is to get us to spend more time on those platforms. So these AIs, perfectly through experimentation, have figured out how to manipulate and how to tap into the most fragile part of us, and the most the deepest irrational psychological part of us, just to get us to spend more times on platforms. And that resulted in depression with teens, complete social media addiction, screen addiction. But it also resulted in Donald Trump, because if you can weaponize the combination of psychology and technology, and for instance in Flanders where you live, it exactly the same thing. I think the fact that the extreme right party in Flanders, Vlaams Belang, won the previous election, was that they finally understood how to flood social media with fear mongering, and they do this on a very, very detailed local level. So they weaponize that knowledge. And my company, SUE, is all about how can we use that, what I call dark wisdom of influence, to shape positive behavior. So that's deeply rooted in our mission. We feel that we want to unlock that knowledge, that know-how, to shape positive behavior in the long run. And so if I work for banks, I'm all about how can I help people to make more wise financial decisions. If I work for government, is how can we get people to recycle more or to drive more safe.
And how many people are working in your company?
We're eight people on the payroll, and
so,
4 or 5 freelancers.
Yeah, and so does that mean that every person who is entering your organization, you're going to screen them and assess them on their values, on their attitude?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I mean, in the 60s or in the 70s, they made packages of cigarettes and they put in black and they put a skull on it, and it was targeted for 14, 15 young children, because they found the skull really attractive to start smoking. The same with which they did, that they put ladies in their jeans with white t-shirts and a cigarette, to really link smoking to the independence of the female. I mean, does that also mean that when a company is hiring you to do something which does not, which is actually conflicting your values and your purpose, you're going to say no?
Absolutely. Well, we've done that many times. a couple of months ago, someone. So we do two things. We do consultancy for our clients to help them to to optimize their products and their proposition and their marketing. But we also have a behavioral design academy in which we train people in this methodology.
Yeah.
And a couple of months ago, someone enrolled from Philip Morris in Switzerland. And my partner and I wrote him and go and fuck yourself email, and he was very he was mad. He said, what the fuck are you doing? And I said, no, we don't want you. And then we quickly adapted the conditions on our website. He said, look, it's in our conditions, you can't participate. So absolutely not. The way we see things is we approach things from a human-centered point of view, which means that for everything we do, every intervention that we try to design, the number one question we ask ourselves: how can we position this product or service in such a way that it helps people to become more successful at what they do? And if we can't answer that question, if the question is how can we manipulate people to buy more of what we're offering, then we simply won't go into it. And I own the company together with my wife, so we can be very irrational or brutal about it.
And how long does the company exist?
Since 2011. So I moved to Amsterdam in 2000, and so I moved to Amsterdam to 2007. First built a Belgian advertising agency 5 years in a row, and then left the agency to start my own company in 2011.
And you left the agency because it doesn't correspond with your values anymore. You want to do something more mission-driven, purpose-driven. So where did you get that idea to do that?
Well, as you mentioned in the beginning, I studied psychology, clinical psychology. I quickly realized that I didn't want to work in psychiatry. Then by pure luck, I got a job in market research, and then I ended up in an advertising agency. And that advertising agency asked me to, after 2 years, if I would want to move to Amsterdam and start their Dutch dependence.
Yeah.
Which I did. But after 5 years, I was getting more and more frustrated because the more I learned about the advertising world, the more I understood that that this world is going to be massively disrupted in the next couple of years. Wow. And that there's going to be more and more agencies trying to live off this smaller and smaller piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Piece of the cake, and I was thinking to myself, everything that I found fascinating is currently being done in the world outside of advertising, and mainly in the tech world, in which lean startup as a philosophy of doing rapid experimentation, having multidisciplinary teams of designers, psychologists, technologists, working together in quick prototyping sprints. So instead of coming up with big strategies, you just prototype strategies and make progress out of that. And I thought that was so much more fascinating. So I had the feeling that if I wanted to, figure out how to, let's say, transform the value of an independent agency, I needed to get rid of advertising and started something new. And it took us a couple of years to figure out how to make that work properly. I think the first couple of years we were lucky that a lot of clients simply went along with us, although that they said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I trust that my marketing strategy is good with you. And gradually we figured out that we designed this process called the behavioral design method that is this very fast process in which we try to understand the unconsciousness of the target audience. We design and prototype interventions to see if we can learn how that could influence their behavior. And this method is really what we say.
Cool. It's really inspiring. And what they didn't know is that you actually won lots of prizes. You're actually some kind of celebrity in the advertising world.
Wow.
How do you stay so humble? Is it your West Vlaamse roots?
Yeah, I think it's deeply rooted in being a West Vlaming, in that sense that I still remember that my friend said when I left for the Netherlands in 2007, one friend at a certain moment said, look, if the moment I see that you're going to become an arrogant Dutch person, I will punch you in the face. and I still remember it because I felt that that was a good criterion. I must say that that I gradually, no, not gradually, I immediately fell in love with the Dutch. I think that the Dutch are, of all the cultures in the world, the Dutch are completely open and honest. There's no hidden agenda. They just say what they think, and even if you are the managing director, and I remember that the first time I hired the secretary, literally on the first day, she said, "No, I'm not going to do this," and I was thinking, "What the fuck is going on here?" And she just felt that that what I asked of her was not part of the of the job description. So I had to explain to her. And the thing is, in the Netherlands, if you explain them what you want, then they accept it and they do it. No questions asked. Whereas in Belgium, we can't stand authority, but we accept it. But somehow we're always nagging about it, behind people's back.
But that's the thing. And in Belgium, you get they say yes in your face, but after your back, they're having behavior that say no. And so they're going to create some false form of trust in the organization. Yeah. Whereas I worked, a lot of years with it's called very close to Amsterdam. I forgot the city, but it doesn't matter. So I got a lot of that Amsterdam mentality. So they say, "Weren't you born in the Netherlands?" I mean, because of that very direct openness. Because in Belgium, indeed, people are, especially in the more southern part. That's why it for me it's more difficult to work there, because they are, you have to dance a lot around the pot, as we call it, and that's just not my style. And the older the older I become, I find it very important to stay true to myself. And yes.
So sorry to interrupt. No. I do think that because your question is humbleness, and I think that in my experience, the more I know, the more I know that I don't know anything, and so I'm very much driven by a deep curiosity and a deep sense of understanding that whatever the context is, I'm just scratching the surface of what I could know and should know, and that makes you more humble. And I do think that it's not a sense of false humbleness. It's much more this attitude of curiosity that basically shapes every interaction that I have with people, and that kind of brings you to a more, let's say, humbler kind of approachable kind of identity.
Maybe it's also the age and I mean, it's like when you have landed on the moon, what's next? So I mean, there is no such thing as there finding happiness. It's really, because I fully agree with it, the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know. And actually, the more I had to de-learn all the fake or false conditions that society, culture, I don't know what, tried to put on me, then I discovered maybe this isn't true. Maybe it isn't like that. And how do you do that? Reading, traveling, because the way we think, which is life and culture, is not the same like in South America, for instance. They think about certain topics quite different.
Yeah.
Now, now we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to talk about the ego. I think also a very interesting subject, especially in psychology.
Yeah.
Studied a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, if you look at yourself, I mean, you've realized already quite a lot of things. How do you manage your ego? Or is it something you never ever think about or talk about?
Well, look, your ego is a terrible thing in that sense. No, your ego is well. First of all, there's no such thing as a true ego. An ego is nothing more than a set of rules and strategies to interact with the world. Yeah, so there's this nice saying that says, "You are what you repeatedly do," and I think our ego is being shaped through all the interactions that we had. I can easily say that the person that I became is completely a function of all the interactions that I had. There's this part, of course, innate. There's this part, the guy I was when I was 20. There's a part of me being shaped by being in the Netherlands. And so all these things come together in what I call a strategy to interact with the world. And the strategy to interact with the world is your ego. And the problem with of course, with your own personal sense of happiness and with life in general, is that we tend to think that happiness results from feeding that ego or boosting that ego. And so we're all hunting for success and we're hunting for recognition. And we're constantly trying to see that ego being, being pampered.
Yeah.
And we're completely addicted to this repetitive sense of that your ego matters. And so that's for instance one of the key things that social media exploit. They constantly give us these little dopamine shots, so our ego gets gets the sense that people are still thinking about us and that we're still important. So I think what you should try to figure out is how can you achieve happiness beyond your ego, or how can you simply live in the moment. And I'm not that much of a spiritual person because I want to approach spirituality kind of through the scientific lens. That's why, for instance, I love listening to Sam Harris. He really uses the philosophical, the philosophical deduction knife to try to analyze mindfulness and how can you get more into the moment, and how can you, like for instance, if your ego is fragile, you will every time someone will give a comment on you, you will be broken. And whereas if you get a bit detached by your ego, you learn to reprogram your mind, and you will see a negative feedback as an opportunity to learn. And the more you're capable to do that, the more you are basically able to shape any kind of personality that you want to shape. And I think freedom is, you can never get rid of ego, but freedom could be that you can have as many egos as possible. You can highlight as many aspects of or play with as many aspects of your personality as you want to. And I think there's a lot of happiness and excitement to be found in playing with parts of your own identity and exploring parts of that.
I think that's the core, is that if you see your ego not as the same as your identity, so but see that as a different thing, and indeed that the ego is your servant but not the master. Because in the first thing you explained, you're feeding the ego, I think there you're going to see the ego as your master, but it's going to make you miserable. But if you see your ego as a servant to let you do things like doing this, I mean, if you told me 20 years ago you will do something on YouTube, or what? And you will start a podcast, or what? I mean, I was like, no, I don't care. But it's really about that. It's seeing how far you can go and how can you construct a new mini ego to see how far you can come into this life, and to see, is this your thing? Is this not your thing? Very, very, very interesting.
And just play with it. The older you get, the more you realize that that there's nothing in life except your relationship with the people you love that is important. And once you start to realize that, you can simply get a little bit detached, but I think you get more detached from things. So I can't be bothered by success, although that you have to be a little bit successful in order to sustain your own life. And once you achieved success, it's quite easy and blasé to say that. So I'm fully aware of that. On the other hand, when things go wrong, and as an entrepreneur, things go wrong a lot, you get smacked in the face by life quite often. You tend to not be hit too hard by it, because it's just work, it's just play.
But is that the same about your essay about the climate change? Is that if you focusing, I want to become successful, and if I'm successful, I will be happy or I will be lucky. I mean, totally. I mean, it's just the other way around. You're happy right now, and therefore you are happy with everything there is. And therefore you're going to become successful and achieve things, whatever that means. That's success for you, having lots of money and things like that. But because I learned that the hard way when I was 30. I was it was because of also the studies I did that you are really breeded into, you should become CEO and make lots of $1 million, and you have a bigger house than your neighbor and a bigger car and things like that. But then I realized that I put my ladder to the wrong mountain, because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
makes you, because it doesn't stop.
No.
And a lot
No.
of people don't see that. They think, oh yeah, if I'm successful, and whatever that means successful, I mean, a lot of followers, lots of money, a title, whatever, then I'm going to be lucky or happy. But it's just that other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. And so being meaningful for someone else, for instance, turns out that in positive psychology, that this is one of the key drivers of happiness. If I can help someone else to become successful, or make them grow in their life, this is where real happiness is to be found. Is to, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The mountain to put your ladder on is a great metaphor.
I mean, the thing I
Fantastic.
learned is that in between 20 and 30, 35, I actually was focusing on myself, serving myself, learning to sell and blah, 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 and things like that. And then I realized if I helped others by making them better people in whatever they are, is it a seller or whatever what they are doing, making them better persons with the things that I have in me that I can help them, it gives me lots of, I wouldn't say call gratitude, but really a very good feeling if I can help somebody else, and seeing the potential of somebody growing and blossoming. I don't know, but it sounds really pussy and really soft, but it's, for me, it's like that. If you can uplift others, and at the same time also, I mean, a lot of people think by, if I win, you have to lose, but it's just the other way around. You can
Yeah,
win, and all
absolutely.
the others can win too. And it
Yeah.
sounds really corny, but I really believe it's the truth, and that will make make me at least happy. And you could
Yeah.
also apply that in a professional context, eh?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Always think win-win situation instead of zero-sum games. I think that's a very uh, core principle to live by. If you can design a relationship, even if you're in sales, in which you can create a win-win situation, you will have much more long-term relationships,
It's
and
about
much
that.
more.
It's
Yeah.
that, the engagement, the long term, and treating people as people. And you're talking about advertisement, but it's the same for sales. If you look at sales, the classical sales methodology is they treat people, and it's the same within HR. HR, the word alone, resource. I mean, people are people, and people want to be treated as people, and not as some things that needs to be managed. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
now, who are actually for you now role models? Who are people who inspire you?
Um, there's so many. I think, well, when I was in university, there was this Belgian professor called Paul Verhagen. I think he really paved the path of for how I approach science. When I, when I studied psychology in the University of Ghent, he was a phenomenon. He still is a phenomenon. He actually published some really interesting book on psychology, on identity, on authority, and the third one was identity, authority, and I forgot the third one. Anyway, but what fascinated me was that every time he did a lecture, he basically tapped into every science there is. He was constructing a story about the human mind, and he was using anthropology, he was using linguistics, he was using philosophy, he was using literature, a bit in the tradition of Freud, who also was an avid reader of all kinds of sciences, to try to figure out how these sciences can be used as a mental model to look to understand the human mind from different angles and perspectives. And so he was, I think, the first one who I really admired because of his intellectual creativity and of the fact that he wasn't a one-trick pony. And so there's this famous saying by Charlie Munger, the associate of Warren Buffett, who once said, "To a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail." And so when he was asked how come that Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett basically beat the market in investing for more than 50 years in a row. And he said, well, the thing is that we approach problems through 70, 80 mental models. And we take all the important theories from mathematics, from psychology, from biology, system thinkings, from management. And when we study a company or a market, we approach that problem through all these lenses. And so we get a very, very refined image of that market. And I absolutely love that. And I'm very inspired by people who are rich in mental models, because they always have new and interesting sights onto specific problems. They always bring new perspectives. So Rory Sutherland to me is very inspiring. He wrote the book Alchemy, but he's also sensational on YouTube. He's one of the most funny intellectuals to listen to. So Rory Sutherland. Mm-hmm. I like to listen to the Sam Harris podcast, mm-hmm. Sometimes to Joe Rogan, but that's not all of them. Not all of them are worth listening to. I read a lot, so
that was my next question. What are your top 3 books?
Well, Alchemy is definitely the book I would recommend the most.
Why?
But what am I? So by Rory Sutherland.
But why? Why is it so special to you?
Well, because he.
Because Alchemy, that brings for me a very different assumption or perception. It sounds really. You don't say I'm not a spiritual person, but that you name Alchemy.
Yeah. No, it's of course this provocative title that says about if you want to understand how you should design products and services, taking into account human irrationality, taking into account psychology, you will come up with much different insights. And so his claim is that in marketing and in business, we tend to approach problem from a very rational perspective.
Correct.
We design products and services with a rational human in mind. And he said there's all kinds of fascinating insights with the fact that you can create psychological value in people's life by tapping into things that a rational person would never think of. And so this book is so interesting because it translates behavioral economics into what does this mean for products design, for marketing, for advertising. And he's a great storyteller, which is, I think, also something that I admire in people. If you're a good storyteller, that means that you master your own craft. Because only good storytellers really internalize knowledge. So what books am I reading? I thought that Super Forecasters by Philip Tetlock was really interesting, on basically the art and science of forecasting. I read Midnight in Chernobyl last month, which is a fascinating account of what happened in Chernobyl when the nuclear reactor exploded. It's a magnificent reading on how systems basically shape the behavior of people, because it's a story about people that simply there was this reactor was already dysfunctional for years, but nobody wanted to hear bad news. So the communist system was designed in such a way that boss above boss didn't want to hear anything negative. So problems were constantly boiling on the lowest level until it just literally erupted. So that's fascinating. I am now reading the book Wilding from Isabella Tree, which is on rewilding nature. I'm reading
Rewilding nature.
Yeah.
It's about nature.
Well, it's about, indeed, given the fact that that industrial agriculture will deplete the soil in the next 50 years. Literally, in England, the natural science or the science said we still have 50 harvests left, and then the soil is completely eroded. And so there's these really interesting experiments all over the world, like for instance here in the Netherlands with the Oostvaardersplassen, on how can we, rewild nature again? How can we basically re-engineer ecosystems to the point that they become healthy ecosystems again? And so if, for instance, if you look at the Netherlands here in the north of the Netherlands, that's just agricultural wasteland. It's just industrial agriculture, grassland, cropland. There's no life possible over there. And so if you want to rethink nature, we need to, look at all these interesting theories on how do you create healthy ecosystems, which I think is then again quite fascinating to also think about human behavior. If you can redesign ecosystems, if you can think about systems and think of how can I design a system in such a way that the interactions between the elements in that system become positive again, and there's all kinds of interesting feedback loops and growth that follows from that, you can apply the same kind of thinking to humans. I also love on a fictional level the novels by Laurent Binet, French author. He wrote a book on Heydrich called HHHH, this ha 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 ha, which is one of the best books I've read in the last couple of years. Published a new book. It's currently a bestseller called Civilizations, in which he explores the idea what would have happened if we wouldn't have conquered South America in the 16th century, but if the Incas would have conquered Europe.
Yeah,
which is
interesting,
mind-blowing book. So yeah, I basically read everything I can get my hands on.
I have a very shocking question now for you. You talk about the mind to mind. There is in the East, they believe there is a mind-body connection, and in the Western science, they're already researching that for quite some years.
Yeah.
What is your opinion about that? Is there a connection between the mind and the body?
I think the mind is just a theoretical construct. We think with our body, and the fact that we have devised body and brain body and mind into two things, which dates back to, I think, early Christian philosophy, really is just a construct that is completely wrong. But we can't help it. We are hardwired to look at the world through metaphors, and it's just a metaphor that we've been using all along. But I think that we think with our bodies, and our bodies respond intuitively to our environment. And if you can't, I mean, for instance, when you are completely happy and in the moment, it is your body that is completely happy and enjoying things. It's dopamine rushes or serotonin rushes through your body. It's for instance, when you're in a great conversation, you get this physical connection that you literally disappear. Your mind
like now, you mean?
Exactly. As your mind disappears, and literally your ego disappears, and you become one with the conversation.
But that's flow. That's Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's I believe that's the nature of the human being. If I look at my child of 2.5 years, I just how to say that had bought a very small swimming pool. They are now sold out in Belgium, these swimming pools.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But when he sees that and the water, that's pure joy. There is no such a thing as tomorrow. It's what are we, Wednesday or Thursday? It's that. I mean, you're referring for quite some time in the moment and in here and now. It sounds very Eckhart Tolle. You know that?
Yeah, I haven't read him, but a lot of friends are very very keen on Eckhart Tolle.
But you don't have to read it. You know it already. It's about that. It's just experiencing what is happening right now.
There's one of the most fascinating books I read last year was the book How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, and it's basically a book on the history of research into LSD and psilocybins. So in how do you call it? Psychedelic research. That's what I was looking for. And I thought it was, so Michael Pollan is this famous journalist. He also wrote books on food. And he then decided, let's explore this. And his premise was, let's explore the research into psychedelics, not only for the purpose of psychedelics, but most importantly for the purpose of understanding the human mind or understanding the brain. And indeed, what psychedelic research reveals is that a person who is in a psychedelic trip, what happens with psychedelic compounds is that they mute the part in your brain that is associated with ego. So they literally suppress that part. And what the result is that you get raw, unmediated connection with both your inner thoughts and with the world around you. And so that's why people who are experiencing a good LSD trip, yeah, they are completely in awe of everything, in awe of they sense deep love for everything, and it's precisely because their ego gets completely suppressed. And so I think whether you do an LSD trip or whether you try to be mindful about things, or you do meditation, it's basically all techniques you try to use to suppress your ego and
That's
to,
true.
to experience life much more.
It's that inner criticus. I've read an article, I think a couple of years ago, where a guy had, or a gentleman had a car accident, and I believe it was his right wing, or how do you call it, from his brain was damaged. So it was the same as having a trip. And he said, these were the best, and it was the most happiest days of my life. Yeah, and so I wish they never ever fixed the thing again. Yeah, it's strange. Now, in 10 years, who is Tom de Bruyne?
I have no idea, and I don't want to have any idea about that. I hope I will constantly be able to reshape myself. And there's of course this catch. You don't want to be the ultimate product of of how reality just throws you into certain directions. You want to shape that direction. But I do want, basically, I think that the way that both Astrid and I would want to approach this is that by shaping the conditions in which serendipity and adventure and new possibilities arise, because the only way to happiness is to pursue curiosity. And I have literally no idea who I'm going to be. I'm going to be together with my wife. That's for sure.
Yeah. That's fantastic. It sounds very that you don't want to be a victim of your life, and that you don't want to react on the events. That you actually choose to not be a victim of the events happening in your life, but really want to be the creator, the victor of your life. And I think a lot of people don't live like that because they're actually in a kind of an autopilot and in survival modus, and not in a growth modus. Because I believe a human being has two modes: the survival protection modus, like in a war, or the growth modus, where you are experimenting things, you feel emotionally safe, and it's going to hurt you, or you get pain because you or fail, but that's good. That's the learning part. Where did you get that mentality? Was it something from your parents? Was it something through your studies? It's something you developed yourself, if it's from your wife, or you took too much weed in Amsterdam?
No. I took more weed when I lived in Belgium than when I lived in Amsterdam. Once you have 5 coffee shops in within 200-300 meters around your door, it just loses its excitement.
Be careful, because Sam Harris has also experimented with LSD and psychedelic stuff for his podcast.
Yeah, I know, but I haven't heard about him. I haven't heard talking about it. Yeah, I should catch up on that one. It's true. I don't know. I think it gradually had to do with it's a bit like this Corona crisis. Once you get thrown into new things, it opens the way to discover new things, or to get rid of parts of your old self. And so I had the luck, I must say, that it happened a couple of times. So when I left my house, when I was 21, when I divorced, when I moved to the Netherlands, when I started my own company, every time you do something big in your life that you inject or you throw in a crisis, it provides tremendous opportunity for growth. And so the biggest challenge, I guess, for us now is everything's kind of perfect now. We have a nice company. The work is fulfilling. We're in a certain flow. We live in, really, if you would look outside here, we live in the most beautiful, along the canals in Amsterdam. So it's absolutely beautiful. But the problem is that if you would cling on to that, you will get bored, because a well-lived life is a life in which you can constantly learn new things. As you said, this growth mentality. And I think that complacence is really the danger that lures around the corner. Because if you can get complacent because life gets easy and because there is something like success, you will get bored quite easily. So we need to figure out ways to constantly push ourselves again into this zone of unknown, into this zone of oh, just a second. When we had it? Oh, okay. Of course, the most important object in the house is the charger for the iPad. Yeah, so something like that. Yeah.
Look, yeah, cool. It's amazing, yeah, how I would say positive you are, because like you said, you have a perfect life, perfect wife, perfect kids, everything's perfect, perfect company. But indeed, if you become too attached to that,
Yeah.
that will. It's the same again with that money or happiness search thing. If you become too attached to it, it will result in ending of certain things. It will break down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
And
the
it's
whole.
not and it's not easy. I'm actually struggling with it quite often, but it's precisely through this struggle that that you want to try out new things.
And the struggle is that you're anxious of losing it.
No, the opposite. The struggle is that you gradually stop being present and mindful because you know everything. It just goes
So
the
you're
way it goes.
so you're falling asleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the worst thing that can happen for a company, is that once you're getting successful and customers are coming by themselves and EBITDA is fine and things like that. And I think that's the worst thing that can happen, because for me, then you will fall asleep. It's like cocaine. And then suddenly you wake up and the whole world has changed and you're going bankrupt. I exaggerate, of course, but there has to be some kind of uncertainty. And that uncertainty keeps you at your toes and drives you further through life.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the key driver for discovery. You constantly trying to figure out how to make things work, and this whole game of trying to figure out things gradually is what drives excitement.
Yeah, but that is the journey. Eh? That's it. Eh? Last question, Tom. What is still for you a crazy dream? But a crazy dream. I mean, you have done very successful campaigns for like KLM, I saw, which you also received big prizes for. What was for you, I don't know, a big dream? Do you want to speak at a very big TEDx in the US, or play in a Hollywood movie? It has to be crazy dream, eh? I mean, something really. You want to be the next Freud?
No. I do think that well, first of all, these prizes were back in the advertising days, so they are all about ego. Although they definitely help you to, they give yourself shortcuts to introduce yourself to potential new clients. Mm-hmm. Hey, we are that agency. We already won awards, so we're good. You don't need to doubt about that. That came in quite handy, but. I would say that the dream lays in impact. So it's not about being famous for your thinking, famous for your writing, but actually, I don't even want to be famous. But
that's a side effect.
Somehow, that's a side effect. Yeah, absolutely, and all an unpleasant one, because being famous these days is really being at the core of this engine of hatred by extreme right populists. So you don't want to be in that position. I kind of don't like to be in that position. I like to be in a more harmonious position. But I do want to be part of something bigger, part of creating change, part of creating impact, part of a movement that uses this knowledge and this understanding of behavioral change to to get people to change, or to change and rechange society for the better. And so one of the coolest things was that I was involved in, or that we were involved, I must say, in the Dutch elections in 2017, where we helped the Liberals to beat extreme right populism through this signs of influence. but I think that my dream would be indeed to operate more on the, for instance, the climate challenge. Yeah.
Tom, you're a beautiful person.
Thank you.
I thank you for your time, your energy.
You're welcome.
For me, it was a really flow experience. Pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Likewise. Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what I meant with flow. Yeah, thank you.
Because you had absolutely no idea what to expect.
No, that's true.
And you stayed so calm while your son was walking around you. But I found it really charismatic, and especially for these times, it's about that. Because for me, that's the biggest thing that I learned in Corona is not to try to be a perfect dad and try to be a perfect business guy, but just to go into the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. At the place.
So Tom, I wish you all the best, and I'm sure that the things you're doing right now are going to create a very big impact on society.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.